Welcome to Young Leaders and Entrepreneurs in the Drone Industry, a webinar produced by MarketScale. I'm your host, Grant Giat. I'm a drone and regulatory attorney at the law firm of Adams & Reese, where I lead the Unmanned Aircraft Systems practice team. Today, we will discuss the successes and challenges faced by our speakers in the commercial drone sector, as well as the risks and rewards of being involved in pursuing a career in a nascent industry, as well as their hopes for influencing future generations of technological innovators. Our speakers today represent an array of people involved in the industry, including manufacturers of drones, sensors, and other technology, operators, and counter UAS technology. Our speakers are Brendan Groves, Head of Regulatory and Policy Affairs at Skydio, Kyle Palrosnik, CEO at ProRep, Luke Fox, Founder and CEO at White Fox Defense Technologies, Ryan Walsh, Co-Founder and CEO at Valkyrie, Adam Zayor, CEO and Board Chairman at FlyGuys, and Randall Warness, Global SUAS Segment Leader at FLIR Commercial Systems. Without further ado, we'll go right into it, and I'm going to ask the first question to the panel. So the first question we have is, basically, I want you to tell me a little bit about your organization and how your experiences has led you to the current position you have within your organization. And I'll start with Brendan Groves, Head of Regulatory and Policy Affairs at Skydio.
Well, hey, good morning, Grant. Thanks so much for having me. So as you said, I lead all of our policy efforts and regulatory efforts at Skydio. And Skydio is the largest U.S. drone manufacturer. We're based in California, and we have really a simple mission, and that's to make drones more useful than ever by making them smarter than ever. And the secret to Skydio's success is its breakthrough artificial intelligence technology that our co-founders developed while they were grad students at MIT more than a decade ago. And we've since perfected that technology and adopted it for commercial, defense, and consumer applications. And I joined Skydio after a sort of long and winding and really exciting road across the federal government, where I had the chance to be at the intersection of technology policy, aviation, and security, both national security and cybersecurity. Most recently, I served as Associate Deputy Attorney General of the U.S. Department of Justice. And in that role, I oversaw all national security policy, as well as advised the Deputy Attorney General on a range of topics from counterintelligence to counterterrorism, both domestically and around the world. In addition to that job, I had the really awesome opportunity to lead and to scale DOJ's drone program, which was at a nascent stage when I joined and is now one of the largest public safety drone programs, not only in the country, but perhaps in the world. So I led our executive committee across all 5 law enforcement components to include the FBI, and also served on an FAA committee that's the senior body in the federal government that is integrating drones into the national airspace, the FAA Executive Committee. So it was a really fantastic opportunity to help chart this new course of unmanned aviation, which is important to me as a 20-year-long manned pilot and a former Air Force officer. That's how my career began. And the Air Force also took me to the National Security Agency and elsewhere in the government in the national security space. So Skydio was the opportunity really to jump into the cockpit of a company on the front lines of this new frontier, a company that has a chance to really shape the future of flight. Because we all know, I think, that the future of flight is unmanned, but the future of unmanned flight is autonomous. And that's where Skydio has an edge. It's also an opportunity to help restore American leadership in this industry. If you think about it, and I'll be brief, aviation has always been synonymous with America. It was, after all, in America where the Wright brothers first took flight. But in the world of small drones, America lost its edge. Well, we have our edge back. And it's artificial intelligence, it's software, it's the same things that drove the success of the tech industry that are going to drive the success of this next frontier of unmanned flight. And that's what we're doing at Skydio.
Thanks, Brendan. And I'll add, there's, you and I have discussed this, that right now in this country, there's certain apprehension of using foreign source products, foreign source drones, and definitely desiring to see more American-made products in this industry. So it's excellent that Skydio is making those strides. I also want to add that Brendan and Adam Bry from Skydio will be on MarketScale's video podcast that I host drones in America. And that episode will be Wednesday, July 8th. I'm looking forward to having you on it, Brendan.
Thanks, Grant.
Let's move on to Kyle Porosnik, the CEO at ProRep. Kyle, you actually are the youngest person on the program today. And obviously that's germane because today's program is all about young leaders and entrepreneurs in the drone industry. And I was, searching for people who are both members of the millennial generation, which is I'm on the upper cusp of that, and then people who are also a member of the next generation, Generation Z. And you really are one of the only people, if not the only person I could find out there who actually falls within Generation Z, who's a leader, entrepreneur in this industry. So kudos to that, accomplishing what you have at such a young age. So why don't you tell us a little bit about ProRep and your background?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. ProRep is an aerial service provider. So our main goal is to take companies that are looking to use drones to provide efficiencies for their business, or maybe they don't even know that they need to use drones to do that. We work with a lot of construction companies, infrastructure inspection, things along those lines. Autonomous systems is something that we're kind of getting into to figure out how having a drone on scene all the time that runs on a regular schedule or that can be flown remotely, what the benefits of that are. Obviously, it looks like the benefits are massive at this point, but we have yet to kind of test that out big scale. So that's kind of what ProRep does. We really focus on the service side of the industry. We don't make our own drones. We don't produce any new technology. We don't do any post-flight analytics with our own software or anything like that. We focus on taking the best of the hardware and the software world that even some of the other panelists are working on, and combining it with the customers who need the solutions and the business efficiencies within their companies.
And I'll add, Kyle, you've actually had some foreign entities reach out to you for, questions about drone infrastructure. And I know they've been impressed with your knowledge. And I also want to add, you're actually in school right now, right?
I am. Yeah, I just finished in May.
So you graduated or you're still in?
I graduated in May. Yep.
Okay. So congratulations. So for a while there, you were balancing school and running.
Oh, yeah.
Well, congratulations on all that. I'm going to move on to Luke Fox, the founder and CEO at White Fox Defense Technologies. It's been great working with you. White Fox, of course, in addition to Skydio and Fly Guys, are all members of the Commercial Drone Alliance. And I've gotten to know you in that regard, and I enjoy working with you. A critical component of where we are in this industry is counter-UAS technology. So I'm glad to have someone prominent in the industry who represents that aspect of it. So Luke, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and White Fox?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Grant. So I think the best way to explain what we do is just through imagination. Right? So if you imagine looking outside your window right now and you see a drone flying there, I question you, it's drones hovering outside your window. How do you feel? Right. And this is really what spurs and fuels our passion for drones, is that you look outside the window and you feel probably a sense of insecurity, fear, all these negative emotions. And we believe at White Fox that the only way to solve for that and to allow us to truly embrace drone technology and use drones for all the ways they can benefit society is to create trust. And that trust in autonomous technology requires transparency and accountability. And so that's what White Fox uniquely provides. When you look the world over, there's a lot of solutions to take down drones. There's a lot of ways to know they're there and take them down. But our focus is, how do you surgically safely remove them from the sky to create accountability so that then you can have transparency in the drones who are authorized to fly. And so we work with nuclear power plants, with data centers, financial institutions, prisons, borders, federal government agencies, who all need to ensure that every drone that's flying in the airspace has transparency and accountability, so that they know when they see a drone in the sky, instead of feeling fear, they can feel trust, knowing that that drone is supposed to be there and it's benefiting their lives and making them work more efficiently and effectively, right to Kyle's point.
Great. Thanks, Luke. And again, when so much of our problem in this industry is public perception and people fearing drones, it's companies like you that are actually pro-drone, which really help complete that puzzle. So thanks for all you do. So Ryan Walsh is the co-founder and CEO at Valkyrie. Valkyrie is an interesting company because it provides a device that I think is often overlooked when we're discussing drone deliveries, and that's the receptacle, the means by which to receive a product that a drone is delivering. So Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Valkyrie?
Sure. Thanks, Grant. We've been working on this for a number of years, and where we differ from a lot of the current models is we're looking from the consumer up, right? The technology it has proven itself time and time again, and it just requires the ability to scale. But separating that drone from the consumer is really the key, right? Making sure that they're not in a position where they can get harmed or damaged. It's really about making sure that the convenience factor is there. I don't want to be home to have to wait for my package. So having this autonomous receptacle really separates the entire delivery from the consumer, so they can go about their day, spend more time with family, and stay safe during the delivery.
Great. And how long have y'all been in business?
We've been working on this since 2013. We stood Valkyrie up as the operational side in 2017.
Great. So Adam Zayor, CEO and board chairman at Fly Guys. And of course, Adam, I'm going to tell everyone your true claim to fame, which is that you were my first drone client. I'm just kidding. You've done a remarkable job putting Louisiana on the commercial drone map. You started out in Lafayette, Louisiana with 10 pilots operating in 4 states. What number are you at now with Fly Guys?
We're at around 3,500 pilots throughout the nation.
And that's all 50 states and international, right?
That's all 50 states, and then we have partners in 72 countries.
So what gave you the idea to look into pilot networks, establishing
Well, so back in 2014, I was in heavy industrial construction, building refineries and plants and that sort of thing. And we started taking drone images for marketing purposes. And as I was looking at the drone images, I realized that we could essentially use this for progress monitoring and documentation. And at that point, I was like, okay, I want to invest in this some kind of way. At the time, there weren't any publicly traded drone service companies. I don't think there's any now still. So what I did is I just went ahead and hired somebody to work for 2-3 years, and then once they changed the regulations from 333, which essentially limited the number of drone pilots from 5,000 people, to the 107, it skyrocketed the number of pilots out there. So a typical business model, wasn't really, in my view, a way to scale quickly. So we quickly changed to a network model, and then we started going after large scale, international, national clients, and we just went from there.
So from 10 pilots to 3,500 or more, that's just amazing. I cracked a joke at the beginning of this that, you are my first drone client, but it's been such a privilege working with you guys and watching you grow. It's all you and the other officers, and y'all done a great job growing the business. And it's been a joy to work with y'all and watch it continue to flourish. So congratulations on all that.
It's been a pleasure to work with you as well. I appreciate it.
Randall Warnes is the Global SUAS segment leader at FLIR Commercial Systems. Randall, good morning, first of all, but secondly, you actually were the featured guest on my latest episode, the latest episode of Drones in America by MarketScale, the podcast I host, where you and I think had some really engaging discussions. I had a blast talking with you. Tell me a little bit about what you do with FLIR and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you having me on this as well. So I run the global strategy and just overall business for FLIR's commercial drone efforts. FLIR is the largest manufacturer of thermal imaging technology. So pretty much when you think thermal imaging, it's synonymous with FLIR. So I basically travel around the world speaking at conferences and evangelizing for the technology, as well as working with manufacturers, software developers, and end users on how they use thermal imaging technology in their workplace. This is from firefighters and police departments to solar inspection, utility inspection, oil and gas. So it's a pretty diverse crowd that I get to work with, and I think that because FLIR has a pretty good hold of market share for thermal imaging technology, we get the benefit of working with nearly everyone in a sort of collaborative way. So there's a lot of doors that open because of that. I got my start in the drone industry in 2014, started the first drone retail location in the world in Las Vegas, Nevada, called Drones Plus. We expanded to 15 locations within 9 months, from Honolulu to Orlando, Miami to in Canada. So in the early days, I was somebody that had hired more people in selling drones face to face than anybody. I knew the technicians, I knew the people that could, be on the front lines of those sales outside of online sales. So I was approached by DJI in 2015 to start running their aspirations for having retail stores. And instead, once I sold my shares to my partners and joined DJI, they said, well, we're not going to do the retail thing. Instead, we want to start an enterprise division. So I laid the foundation of DJI Enterprise, bringing that toy concept to a tool for DJI. And at that time, worked with probably 120, 130 Fortune 500 companies on their drone strategies. And in the early days, there weren't a lot of these other manufacturers that are doing amazing things domestically. So it was like, when someone thought drones, they thought DJI, which, still tends to be the case, but there's different political things around that. But a lot of doors were open at the time. And so now, with the amount of interactions and relationships I've built over time, I think that my contribution to the industry is just using my black book to make different connections throughout the industry and, leverage the best technology that's out there. So it's great to be on this panel with such a diverse crowd. Some of you have known, some of you I haven't known in the past, but I'm looking forward to building the friendships based on this. So thanks for exposing me to this great group of people, Grant, and look forward to seeing how this goes.
Absolutely. And, Randall, we're all looking at ways of how to gauge just how bad 2020 has been, or how different 2020 has been from 2019. I think we have an interesting way of gauging it from your perspective. How many flights did you take?
Yeah. So last year I did 114 flights over 26 countries, spoken over 5 continents. This year I've done 13 flights. I went to London and I've been to California a few times. So it's a bit different world that I'm living in right now, which is good. I got a baby on the way, so it's good for my wife.
Congratulations.
To see a little bit more than she usually does.
Well, congratulations.
Appreciate that, brother.
So let's move on to the second issue I kind of wanted to discuss. And this is, I want to ask you guys, what are some of the challenges you have faced in this industry as an entrepreneur or leader? I put this program together with MarketScale today because I thought it'd be interesting to get the perspective of millennials and Gen Zers on what it takes to not only survive in this industry, but to thrive, to help move this industry forward, which, obviously there's a congressional mandate to integrate drones into the national airspace. And I think all of us are playing our part to do that against, some would say against some heavy odds, but we've had a great support system out there. And I think we've all done a great job working together to advance this industry. But nevertheless, there certainly have been challenges, I think, for each of us along the way. And Randall, while I have you, I want to go ahead and start with you. What are some of the challenges you faced?
Yeah, so I'm the guy that still goes to conferences at Vegas, and then when I sit at a blackjack table, I get carded, and I'm 34 years old. So I look young, and I act young, and I speak young, and I've always been kind of more of a laxed person. And so I work for a publicly traded, $2 billion revenue company that is very military contractor minded. It's a very good old boys network, and I have been kind of the misfit in that, and I've kind of tried to drive my value within the company as being a different way to do things. So like Zoom meetings, it's something that's been normal in my life for years, but for a lot of these people within FLIR that have been dealing with the effects of COVID, it's a little bit spooky to them that how much digital interaction there is. And social media being another thing that FLIR hasn't necessarily understood how powerful it is to be able to interact with your network off the clock and in a personal way. So I've just kind of had to pioneer my own way through being kind of somebody that's on more of like the new age technology end of things within an old technology minded organization. And definitely there's times where it's very easy to, join a meeting, enter into a meeting with some senior people, and they're looking for like an older person to represent your company. And I felt that. I mean, it's just like, where's the C-suite guy? And it's like, well, I mean, I'm not going to be that guy, but I do feel confident in my expertise in the industry and the things that I could bring forward to anyone that I'm interacting with when it comes to drone technology. So, yeah, I mean, being a young person in this industry and especially working for large companies can be a challenge. However, I think that it's also allowed me to say yes to a lot of things that the good old boy network generally says no to. And it allows me to get in front of a lot of people and build a lot of relationships that maybe would have been, missed out on otherwise.
Definitely. I think, you definitely have an authenticity to you that's extremely valuable in this industry. People like talking to someone they can just be themselves with, and you definitely exude that authenticity. So I can see that and successful. Adam, I'm going to go back to you. I wasn't with you quite at the beginning. It was kind of right after you guys assembled your pilot network, I think, that I started working with you guys. I know there have been some challenges along the way. Fly Guys has met those challenges and thrived. I can't say enough about how impressive it is what you guys are doing, especially in Louisiana, when we are a state where commercial drone activity is kind of, I don't want to say neglected, but we're not one of the top states in terms of drone use. And given the end user industries we have down here, it's really a crying shame. So it's great to see you guys establish a thriving network in our home state. What are some of the challenges you've encountered in running Fly Guys?
I think it's just typical of any startup. So the challenges you face between, making decisions on where to put your capital, where not to, figuring out how that pans out, measuring it properly, and then just, typical challenges to startups, raising cash, figuring out, the best path forward for different things. And then, just essentially being able to adapt quickly and recognizing when things aren't working, moving forward, recognizing when things are working, moving forward more, just typical things like that,
You guys have done a good job with that, and I've been blessed to be a part of that. But this market is constantly evolving. And I think it's companies that have been open-minded and willing to adapt to change that have been able to thrive in this environment. Every day there's a new market report that comes out for our industry, and it's talking about failures, consolidations, companies that aren't making it. And so one of the things I've noticed in analyzing companies and seeing who's thriving out there is it's always companies that are willing to not only stay strong in their core mission, but who are also willing to adapt to what's going on in the world that are really making a difference in this industry. COVID-19 is a perfect example of that. I think a lot of drone companies were kind of thrown when this event happened, as was most of the world. But our industry really has been able to do some amazing things during this pandemic. So I think it's just that willingness to adapt to the situation is so critical. I'm going to move on to Ryan. Logistically speaking, and no pun intended, because your company's obviously very involved in transportation and logistics and the ability for the receptacle to receive the good. What are some of the challenges you have faced? Has it been challenging representing that aspect of the delivery system to potential investors and people in the industry?
Sure. There's not as immediate of a horizon as there was with mining and inspection and some of the things that have been easy to capitalize on, for the last few years. But we've seen sentiment really change. It was really crazy in 2015 when you're talking to angel investors, whereas now people are much more receptive to the idea. So it's slowly developed, and people are seeing delivery, especially with COVID-19, as being critical for the coming years. And so, as we get closer to FAA regulations being a little more viable, so to speak, we're going to start seeing a lot more of that overall mainstream buy-in. So it's getting better. It's getting a lot better.
I agree. I think COVID-19, as I just said, has kind of helped with that. I think people are starting to appreciate the idea of drone deliveries on a level they did not before. And so I definitely think that has helped in this regard. And like I said, kudos to you guys for thinking of the other part of the equation. How do you receive it? So it's great to see how you guys are succeeding with that. So let's go to Luke. Obviously, counter UAS technology, like I said, it's a critical aspect to this whole picture. I would imagine, are people ever surprised to find out that you're actually pro-drone, given that you run a counter UAS company?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. People say, "Oh, you're the guy who hates drones," and it's like, no, that's not it. In fact, we started out. My previous company that I started was a drone manufacturing company making high performance, highly affordable drones. And I realized that the majority of the demand, the overseas demand especially, was coming from places that were suspicious. And I realized that this technology is so powerful that if it gets in the wrong hand, when it gets in the wrong hands, that it would it could be used for great harm. It could be used for drug smuggling, weapons delivery, just general nuisance. And in doing so, not only is that bad, but also it destroys the image of the industry. And so what White Fox is known as is the highway patrol of the sky. And I think it's a great description because a highway patrol, it allows you to be able to drive safely and know you're going to get on the road. And if somebody's doing something bad, there's accountability. They can be safely and securely removed from the road. And at the same time, that enables you to feel safer driving on the road. While at the same time, there are situations where you need tanks, right? But you don't want a tank going down the highway, stopping somebody who's doing something recklessly or maliciously or even drug smuggling in their vehicles. The same thing applies to the skies. In order to open up the highway of the sky, we need to feel that sense of security and safety.
Absolutely. And how long has White Fox been around, Luke?
So White Fox grew out of my previous company, Drones for Change, about 2013 timeframe. We started the full operations 2015. We're known as one of the first companies in the counter drone space, really looking at and still remain one of the only looking at how do we embrace drone technology by increasing that safety.
Great. Thanks, Luke. Kyle, let's move on to you. One of the things I don't think I've mentioned yet, and actually, that you've given me permission to mention, is that you and I work together. I work with ProRep on legal matters. And I remember the first conversation I had with you. I mean, your picture, your face does betray you because you do look really young. But speaking with you, I thought you were closer to my age. Boy, was I wrong. But, you've done some great things at a young age. I mentioned earlier, I know that there have been companies, I think from other parts of the world that have actually reached out to you and encouraged you and asked you about the U.S. market and how we do things here in the U.S. and things like that. Does your very young age, does that pose a challenge sometimes when you're dealing with people in this industry?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think being young poses a challenge in a couple different industries. I have businesses in other spaces as well, and I have the same problem everywhere. However, what I will say is that this being one of the smaller industries, it's a little bit easier on here than it has been in some other places, which is great. And Grant taking on our company and all that type of stuff after knowing how young we were and that we were just starting out at that time is really great, and we appreciate that. So thank you.
Oh no, it's my honor. You guys are rocking it. Y'all are doing great.
Thank you. But yeah, I think in general, like Adam was saying, I think like any startup, we had those some of those problems. Where do you raise money? How do you do it? Now that you have it, where do you allocate it? Things like that. And then, we find that the people are probably the hardest part within our company, finding the right people and then keeping the right people. Whether it's your sales teams or your pilots. I know a lot of network pilots kind of bounce around quite a bit unless you have, 50 hours worth of work for them every week, which a lot of companies at this time do not. Certainly not for as many pilots as there are. So I think those are kind of the biggest problems that we've been having so far would be finding the right people, since it is kind of a niche industry at this point, and then keeping those pilots around and interested.
Now I want to point out, you've written some stuff, and I find it, really remarkable that people from other parts of the world have read some of your stuff and reached out to you. I'm curious to know, they probably had no idea that at the time you were 19. So I find that really remarkable. I would be mortified if people read what I wrote at age 19, but you're doing a great job. This industry so well. So congratulations on everything you guys have going on. Brendan, so as you mentioned, Skydio is making a name for itself in America, which is so critical right now for the reasons we discussed and that I brought up earlier. There have been some articles floating around about Chinese drones, DJI, foreign sourced drone technology. The fact is that those drones do have a large share of the market. So I imagine that kind of plays into some of the challenges that Skydio has faced. How have you guys met that challenge in growing, Skydio's presence and start to really take an impressive share of the market?
So thanks, Greg. We really see the status quo as more of an opportunity than an obstacle. So since the dawn of the small drone age, drones have been defined primarily as hardware devices, not as software enabled devices that give you a whole new level of functionality and allow new levels of efficiency and scalability. So we actually think the market is in that sense ripe for disruption. The market's still young. People assumed that Nokia would be the cell phone provider of choice forever in 2005. Those people were mistaken. Apple came out with the iPhone, and then history wrote itself. Google came out with Android. So bottom line, we welcome innovation from all corners. We love that. Skydio is playing a big role in that. You'll hear a lot more from us about the level of market traction that we've enjoyed, which has been, I think, pretty stunning. So again, we actually see just a lot of opportunity to compete and give end users, especially major companies and government agencies, a lot more choices and a lot more functionality. When I led DOJ's drone program, we needed two things that we couldn't find. We needed drones that had high levels of security and high levels of autonomy. We could not find that match. Skydio is at the center of those two things. High levels of autonomy on a very secure platform by a company made in the US. So that's really an opportunity, I think, to play a big role in meeting these needs, advancing the industry and getting to that future of flight, which, as I said before, is autonomous.
Absolutely. And, Skydio, you guys work with the Commercial Drone Alliance as well, and you guys play a role, I imagine a pretty big role in what's going on right now with BVLOS and how important that is to scaling this industry. And And so BVLOS in and of itself, I would say, is a huge challenge. But I do want to note, it's funny you brought up Nokia and Apple, because I actually wrote an article about this foreign source drone issue a couple weeks ago, and Don Zoldai and I were talking about how Skydio is kind of becoming the Apple to DJI's Nokia, or how we could see it going that way. How there was a time when everyone had a Nokia, always thought they'd have a Nokia, and how quickly things change, you know? Right. So
my first job was at Radio Shack, and I sold Nokia phones like hotcakes until the iPhone came along and substantially increased my commission. So I played a very small role in that change earlier on, and it's really fun to see similar competition and more options for consumers and companies in the drone space, just like we saw in the phone space.
Yes, and I also want to make sure I note, as we all know, that the remote ID final rule is scheduled to come out in December, as well as a final rule on easing the restrictions of ops over people. Those are going to be very significant developments, I think, for autonomous drones for sure, but I think for the entire industry. So it'll be interesting to see where things go with that. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in Washington when that happens. But I guess at least the way things are going right now, I'll have to settle for being a fly on the wall in Baton Rouge remotely.
That's right.
So I want to, again, as I've said a couple of times now through the program, I really was fascinated about the idea of getting some millennials and Gen Zers together to talk about how our generations are impacting this industry and influencing the next generation of technological innovators. I gathered from LinkedIn a list of qualities that millennials show in the workplace. And I want to qualify by saying millennials are considered to have been born between 1981 and 1996. I won't go through everyone's ages, but I'll just say that I'm the oldest person on the program today, which, yes, makes me feel like a grandpa. But anyway, I'm glad I was able to participate on this while, you know, I am still a millennial, so I guess a lot of this applies to me. For millennials, we are multitaskers, connected, tech-savvy, curious. Those things don't sound so bad. Then we get into desire instant gratification and recognition. We value work-life balance and flexibility, collaboration, authenticity, transparency, career advancement, and diversity. Overall, that just, it makes us sound like a very high-maintenance generation. Obviously, millennials get a lot of slack. And I should add, these are stereotypes. Obviously, not all of us fit all of these qualities. And Kyle, as we're going to talk about in a second, has a few others as a member of Gen Z that kind of allegedly differentiate him from us. So Ryan, I would think for Valkyrie, definitely being tech savvy, curious, wanting to collaborate, all these are qualities that have helped Valkyrie achieve what it's done with transportation logistics.
Yeah, it's great having a lot of different perspectives. And, you know, we tend to have a bit of a younger team, you know, for a lot of those great qualities you guys just mentioned, you know, with the exception of maybe instant gratification. This has been a very slow burn in the drone industry, but it feels like we're getting close, right? We've really seen this is going to be a phased approach, right? As NASA figures out a lot of the advanced air mobility, as we start seeing what the real world applications end up being. So starting in rural areas and areas where it's safer, you know, you're not flying over people, you're not putting people in unnecessary risk, and moving towards the suburbs and into the urban areas, and not looking at this as so much to replace traditional delivery and courier and logistics services, but really to enhance them, you know, to add a whole new spatial dimension to the ability to deliver on the, you know, short scale, right? That last mile, that last inch, that's really the critical piece right now is how do you create this two-way logistics network that's not as strained as the current system and is inefficient. So looking at this as an enhancement to a lot of things as we start phasing into this over the coming years.
While we're talking about last mile, you know, I work with clients in the transportation logistics industry. I work with a couple drone companies that are looking at delivering in America, obviously, but that are looking at harnessing the power of drones to be able to affect drone deliveries, whether it be under Part 135 or, to a limited extent, Part 107. Last mile delivery is so expensive. I don't think many people understand how rewarding or the cost savings involved by using drones for that last mile delivery. It is truly results in a monumental savings for these companies. One day, assuming hopefully one day in the future, Lord knows we all want instant gratification, but we're obviously not getting it, at least with drone deliveries. There will be more drones in the sky that will be coming down and delivering packages. We're fairly certain that will be happening. One of the issues that comes up, Ryan, is won't this be annoying to 100 times a day, have a drone coming down, you see a drone going down to someone's house, either dropping it off in their depository or some other place, the noise, the factors that go into it. What have you heard on your end about that? And what are some ways you think that as an industry, we can accommodate for that?
I think, those are all good points, and it's, back to how does this affect the consumer? I mean, we saw in Australia, right, noise was a #1 complaint in some of the test markets, right? And we can't be blind to those facts. At the same time, we're in a very infant stage of this, right? I mean, you look at any other industrial revolution, all the way back from even automobiles and trains and things like that, and they started out a little clunky and they've gotten better and better and better every year. Innovation keeps driving. I mean, that's the one staple of this, is nothing will ever stay the same. It's going to keep getting more advanced and smaller and quicker and quieter. And so we've seen it in every other industry ever, right? So, these things are getting addressed, and there's a lot of innovative companies out there, whether through different propulsion systems or prop design or airframe design, that are addressing, all kinds of different requirements for this. But making sure that it doesn't burden people and it doesn't create unsafe risk is really going to be the key, but it's going to become common and people will get used to it, just like everything else in the market.
Like helicopters, people get used to, although those I would say are a little bit more problematic than airplanes. Airplanes we think nothing of.
Right.
Helicopters, even, people are used to it. People are used to hearing cars, buses drive by. Drones are just another form of transportation or another vehicle used within an infrastructure. And I think people are going to get used to that sound. After a while, there's always going to be nuisance issues at first, but people will come to accept it, especially when they realize they can get their prime delivery within 30 minutes as opposed to 2 days.
Cheaper.
The day when and cheaper, the day that happens, I think we'll have a lot of happy people in the public, and I think we'll correct any kind of noise issues we may have. So, Luke, I want to move on to you, and a lot of these alleged qualities of millennials, I think would tie into what White Fox is doing. Certainly the tech savvy quality is there, the curiosity, connections. Why don't you talk a little bit about work-life balance and flexibility? Because, you've talked on quite a few things, and I always enjoy hearing you, Luke, talking about how White Fox is working to not only educate the public, but to show why counter-U.S. technology is such a critical component of pushing the commercial drone industry forward. Where does work-life balance and flexibility play into that for you?
Yeah, touchy subject. So, work-life balance, I think it's something that we as a society are really wrestling with today. As we look through the years, the need for greater agility in how we're operating and being able to change a plan on a moment's notice based off of new inputs is something that I think we're seeing more and more, especially as the pace of innovation has increased. So if we look back, let's say the last 100 years, we go from essentially paper airplanes that you put people in, all the way to fast forward today, where anybody can walk into a department store, pick up a drone, and launch it with zero training, right? Thousands of feet in the sky. The skies have been democratized. And so as we see, that's just one example of the speed of innovation, obviously most relevant to us as a society, or excuse me, us as a panel here focusing on drones, but it also applies, you talked about cell phones, right? The cell phone technology, that speed of innovation is increasing. And so in doing so, we need to be more agile. We need to be able to be more responsive, because every single day things are changing. And so as we look at work-life balance, and as it's no longer, can you say, I'm going to go to work this set hours and I'm going to turn off? And I just don't believe that's how we continue to keep up that pace. I think that flexibility, though, is really important. So like, for example, at White Fox, we offer unlimited PTO. We believe that people are work hard and are going to do what they need to do to get the job done. And we believe in that responsibility for the person. So we don't micromanage that. But at the same time, there is an expectation that if, for example, I have a 4 a.m. call and a 5 a.m. call coming up, and had to get some folks involved in that because we serve customers around the world. The world is so globalized, so interconnected. We have to be agile and we have to be responsive to that, while ensuring that we take care of ourselves and are able to be our best, most healthy people that we can be.
Absolutely. And, this is kind of a random aside, but it's somewhat relevant. Last night, I was rereading an article about an attorney, and Brennan, you're an attorney, so this will probably resonate with you too, but an attorney who was working for a big law firm, and he pretty much got everything he wanted. A couple partners retired, and he was put at the head of this big bankruptcy project. Didn't tell people that he was feeling overworked, understaffed, told his wife goodbye one morning, then shot himself in the parking lot of the law firm. This does not apply just to attorneys. What I'm saying is there's a lot of pressure, I would imagine, especially as entrepreneurs, to constantly have your phone on, constantly be ready to field questions. You've always got to be ready to answer that call, because you never know when an investor really means it when they call you and they say, hey, I want to give you this money. Luke, do you ever turn your phone off?
Well, I'll just say that I don't think I'm the epitome of healthy. So admittedly, no. And I've had exactly that exact horror experience where I had a phone call, an investor was calling, and somebody told me, somebody at White Fox said, like, no, like, you need to set boundaries. Don't answer the phone. It's like way too late. I ignored them, answer the phone, and they literally said, hey, I just want to let you know, we want to invest, and we want to do 2 times what we were thinking about originally. And so it's those types of things where it's like, gosh, dang, like that. How could I not? How can I not just pour myself everything into this? One of the rules I live by is I don't want to live with regret. I don't want to say, had I only given 5% more, this would have worked out. Right. And like, that's the scariest thing to me. I want to know I gave it my all. I did everything I could. And if drones suddenly become illegal around the world, and then it's like that, I know I couldn't have done anything more to bring this drone industry for my small little slice to full fruition.
Absolutely. I don't think they're going to be considered globally illegal anytime soon. I would hope not. But don't feel bad about not being the best person you said to answer it, because Lord knows I'm the last person who should be answering it. I always have my phone on. My wife is constantly saying, one day you're going to wake up, the kids are going to be 18. It's a struggle. It really, truly is a struggle, because you tell yourself, I'm doing this not only for myself, but for my family, the people I care about. But then there is that aspect of, Ferris Bueller says it. We watched it the other day. Life happens when you're not looking, or something like what. I don't want to mess it up, but it's something like that. Like if you don't pay attention, you're going to miss it. And so I think that's no exception to being an entrepreneur and leader in this industry. So Brendan, let's move on to you. Again, these millennial qualities, multitasking, connected, demanding instant gratification and recognition. This is an interesting one, and it's one that millennials are tagged with a lot. I'm sure people out there watching and listening have seen that YouTube clip of the millennial interview, with this girl who goes and sits down, and it's just basically, it's supposed to portray everything that's wrong with millennials. They don't want to have to come in at a certain time. They want to have their phone on at all time. They want safe spaces. They want they take these terms that may be important to some of us, but they blow it out of proportion to a point where they're like, oh, all millennials just want to be huddled in rooms holding teddy bears and being coddled all day. Brennan, obviously given your background, this clearly is not a feasible picture or solution for not only your pre-Skydio background, but also your Skydio background now. We're not going to receive instant gratification and recognition. How important is learning the value of patience and playing the role that you play in a company like Skydio?
So I think in any emerging industry, what you learn is that collaboration is key, right? And that sounds utterly cliche, but I mean, at the end of the day, success is always a team sport. That is nowhere more true than emerging industries where the rules are not clearly defined. The business case will always be evolving. If you don't evolve, you will surely perish in new industries like the drone industry. So patience is key, but patience in terms of forming connections and working with people. I think what's key is, and this is actually, I think, a highlight of millennials, that millennials are typically enjoy collaboration.
Yes.
Even if they may be seeking gratification. And that is really the name of the game. You know, that in a world like this, especially in the policy world, in the regulatory world, you need to understand that dimension, because it's great to produce fancy products in a lab. It's really unfortunate if none of your customers can use those products that all of your R&D dollars were invested in, because you didn't understand the regulatory and the policy overlay. But to understand that and to master it, you need to be able to work with people who vehemently disagree with you and try and help everybody win. In my life in the government, I led the administration's effort to develop and pass legislation that allows federal agencies to detect and disrupt drone threats across the country. This is a law that some of Luke's customers and other counter-UAS companies are relying on today. And that was a big tent project. We dealt with hundreds of external organizations, literally thousands of people over the course of 2 years. Many of them disagreed with even the need to pass such a law. But we found at the end a way to let everybody win. And that's key in an industry like this. If you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to play nicely with others, then you're going to see yourself, fall by the wayside real fast.
And I don't want to get on my soapbox here, but I will say that I think so much of what can be wrong with our country sometimes is that people from all walks of life are not willing to talk to each other and work with each other and collaborate. And, maybe that is something positive about millennials, quote unquote, coming of age, because we've already come of age. But I mean, assuming that by the time we're 40s and our 50s, maybe we'll be able to work together more because we're used to collaborating. We're used to wanting collaboration. It may sound idealistic, but that's the world I want. I want a world where Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi can go have breakfast together out in public, and the media won't even find it interesting, so they don't film it. Like, that obviously will never happen. But the point I'm making is it's a shame. It's a shame that we can't all just be in a room, celebrate our differences, and learn from each other. And I think given your government background, that's probably a key value you've picked up.
It is, yeah. And I tell you, I think only the millennial generation in our country has sacrificed in the military as much as many generations before. Maybe not quite like the greatest generation, but look, I've been in combat with the millennial generation, and I had the chance to lead, millennial men and women in uniform in Afghanistan, and the millennial generation has sacrificed a great deal for this country, all voluntarily, in the wars since 9/11 to protect our freedom and our liberty. And I tell you, at Skydio, we have a lot of people from that generation who bring that same sense of service, that desire to play a part in a story larger than themselves. And that's what we give them at Skydio. And I had the same experience in the military, serving alongside millennial counterparts who had extraordinary contributions to our national security, you know, many of which will remain secret for the foreseeable time in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Teamwork's, I think, the name of the game for our generation. And it kind of allegedly takes a turn when we get to Gen Z, but I'll wait and talk to Kyle about that in a second. Randall, so in getting to know you, I get the sense you're definitely more of a not stay in one place too long kind of guy. I don't mean that in terms of your job. I mean literally. Constantly traveling. You're not a 9-to-5 kind of person. I don't think you can be because of the global nature of your job. How important is flexibility in what you are doing with your career?
Yeah, so as these conversations were happening, I think that Luke used one of my favorite words talking about the drone industry, which is pace. And there's just some people that don't move fast enough to be successful within this industry because the product life cycles are so quickly, because there's always new firmwares you have to deal with, or there's always new players that you have to address. And technology has allowed communication to move so fast that the go-to-market strategy has changed for companies. It used to be, if you built a widget, let's say a vacuum cleaner, you would hire some sales guys and they'd get in their car and they'd drive door to door and try to sell vacuums. And in between meeting 1 and meeting 2, there was a gap of time where they were just driving and alone with their thoughts. Now, go-to-market strategies are social media, our phone calls, our Zoom meetings, our face-to-face visits, our plane trips, we're a global society now where we have to address the entire world anytime that we truly want to launch a product.
Absolutely.
And that is a change that we, this millennial Gen Z group have had to adjust to. I can't say we created it, but we've surely embraced it. And that's why startups exist. Tech startups go to market with very few people within their, very few human resources to leverage, and they have to do a bit of everything. This is something that was not in existence in business 40 years ago, because if you were the CEO, you had investor meetings. If you were the secretary, you answered phone calls. And if you were the sales guy, you went and visited customers, and that was it. But we're just so much more evolved and well-rounded as people, as business people nowadays. And I can say I see that firsthand in interacting with an organization that was very much hand to hand, all deals were done with a handshake. It's not like that anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so complex. And I think that changing what work is, where just because I'm not on a phone call with a customer doesn't mean I'm not working, because I have to share so many of my ideas through creating PowerPoints and stuff. Or I have to be on things like this, which is like, is this work or is this, fun? Is this self-promotion? I don't know. But it's just very different. And you have to be so much more comfortable to do many tasks in today's day and age than you might have had to in the past.
Great insight, Randall. Appreciate it. So, Adam, I want to ask you, you obviously have a network of over 3,500 drone pilots across the country. I assume a lot of those are probably millennials. So I kind of want to ask you a different question. These negative qualities, this desires instant gratification and recognition, demands immediate career advancement, these things that basically put us in a negative light. Do you experience these negative qualities with any of the pilots that you operate with across your network?
I wouldn't want to call out anybody, but I think those are...
Well, no, not by name.
I think those are qualities that are kind of evenly distributed, regardless of age. I've seen those qualities in young people and I've seen them in older people, So I don't know, like you said, it's just a stereotype, and, there's a lot of stereotypes out there that aren't true.
Well, and I should also add, Randall on the side is calling me out on this, and I don't blame him. He is right. Demanding instant gratification and recognition is not necessarily negative. I think it depends on how it is portrayed. I think it is important to note that positive ambition is a great thing. What's not great is stomping your feet and complaining when you don't get something. And when people talk about millennials and instant gratification, I think that's what they tend to think or envision. At least that's what the media tells us. When we read articles about millennials and the fact that we are ambitious and that we want, we do feel some sense of entitlement to recognition, but it's because we've earned it. And I think that the collaboration aspect of that is important because millennials, I think, more so maybe than other generations, are willing to admit that no man's an island. I mean, you have a staff of, I don't even know how big you guys are today, but you have people who are coordinating drone missions across the country. That takes a good bit of collaboration.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have 10 full-time employees here. We have 3 project managers just for nationwide. We have 3 different divisions. Transmission distribution for utility clients is a division, LiDAR is a division, and then just nationwide, aerial data is a division. But I would say, to answer the original question, like Luke was saying, live without regrets. So when I decided to start this business, I was making decent money working as a project manager. But then it's like, I didn't want to look back 30 years from now and think, man, I wish I would have tried something else. I mean, look, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be creative. And then you also have to have the ability to solve extremely complex problems. And you also have to have essentially that never give up attitude, because you're going to face some really hard times, unless you got really lucky, and and it'll start wearing on you, especially if you're in it for 2-3 years, kind of builds up, and you can never turn it off either, right? Because you have to be there for the company.
No.
A good book is Ben Horowitz's Hard Thing About Hard Things, if you want to read a good book about that.
Well, I want to go back to something you said about making that decision to leave behind a profitable career and pretty much start Fly Guys from scratch. I know a mutual friend of ours gave you the advice when you mentioned that to him, because originally I think you were talking about maybe kind of trying to balance it all. But a mutual friend of ours, said, as an entrepreneur, you eat, sleep, dream it. You got to breathe it and bleed it. And I remember you took that advice, and it's the time-consuming nature of being an entrepreneur has got to be so substantial. I wouldn't call myself an entrepreneur, but I am building a practice within an established law firm. And I know just from what I'm doing, the time consumption is crazy. So I can't imagine what it's like building your own organization from scratch. How real was that? Or let me ask it this way. How do you balance the anxiety of running your own business at such a young age with, how do you balance that against the hope that things are going to pay off?
Yeah, so I think at first, you have the adrenaline kind of pulls you through, right? But as you start having to, work essentially all the time, more and more, it starts to wear on you. And then you have to recognize, like I did, and I'm still working on this, that, you have to make sure you eat properly. You have to get rest. You have to exercise. And if you don't do those things, you are going to wear yourself out, because it's constant. You need to be able to separate, and have breaks and that sort of thing. And in order to recover and function fully. But one of the key reasons why I, left the company that I was working for is because I wanted to own something. I was making a really good salary, but, I was just doing it for money as opposed to ownership. At Fly Guys, every single one of our employees is a part owner, and that's for everybody. Anybody that we hire in the future, they're going to be part owners, because I think ownership is a big key in starting a really good startup.
Well, on a side note, I want to add, you brought up balancing work and personal life. In addition, to being your attorney, I have the privilege of being your friend, and I can say you have a fun side life, and I enjoy being a part of it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think you do a great job of, of balancing that. So our lone Gen Zer is Kyle. And Kyle, you basically, according to LinkedIn, have most of the qualities of millennials. You're tech savvy, open-minded, you value diversity and authenticity, except here are the big differences. Allegedly risk averse, which I wouldn't say that's accurate because you're an entrepreneur, independent as opposed to valuing collaboration. And it has here that being competitive is one of the key attributes of Gen Zer. All of these things, again, like the instant gratification thing with millennials, it can be taken positively or negatively, and it can be portrayed by media and cinema positively or negatively. Kyle, do you find that would you characterize your friends, people that you interact with who are within your age range, as risk averse?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And like you said, obviously for most of us on the panel here, being risk adverse is probably not a trait.
Not going to cut it.
Right? This is the wrong industry. And if you own your company, you're in the wrong position for having a risk adverse personality. However, I think there's a lot of people who probably are. Now that can also be seen as a good thing. I don't remember who said it, but either Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or somebody like that, who said, if you want a job done in the most efficient way, and I'm paraphrasing here, but hire the laziest person you can find to do it, right? Because that they're going to do the least amount of work that they possibly have to get the job done.
Interesting.
So you could argue that being risk adverse could be a good thing when you start talking about, mitigation of risk in business, and even for clients that you might have, thinking about how we can make their job site safer or something along those lines. So there's an argument for that both ways, but yeah, I would say as far as being an entrepreneur and if you want to start a business, being risk adverse is something you got to get over pretty quickly.
But being competitive, on the other hand, is a good thing.
Being competitive can be a really good thing. I mean, I know in our business, I'm sure others do this as well, but we have a Google sheet that lists out everybody's commission and sales year to date, which is I find is very helpful for people. It's just a little bit of a healthy competition between our sales teams, and we have 4 different locations throughout the United States, so they like to kind of compete against different locations as well as individuals, and I think that's good. I think it keeps everybody moving forward, inching ahead, trying to beat the next guy. But at the same time, it's not always about who has the highest numbers and all that type of stuff.
We had an interesting question come in that actually pertains to the discussion we're having right now. It
Sure.
says, how does Gen Z differ in their views on how drones can benefit society moving forward? Is there more openness? Obviously, I'm gonna let you comment on that, but I can say from working with you and talking with these other guys, I don't know that there is one. I think everyone kind of has the same hope and picture for where this industry is headed. In terms of there being more openness, I'm not sure what that means. Maybe more. I don't know. I'm not even going to guess what it means. But I want to hear from you. Would you have noticed? Do you notice the way you view the industry being different from how people who are older than you view the industry?
I'm sure probably a little bit, right? And even like Ryan was saying earlier, with their trials in Australia, noise being one of the big complaints. That's a perfect example. Because I think, like we were saying, if we can get an Amazon Prime delivery in 30 minutes instead of 2 days, is it really the noise that you're going to care about? And I think younger people who are more used to having their cell phone go off all the time, things like that, they're used to having some of that busyness going on, right? A lot of people put headphones in when they're working, right? So that you can listen to music, think, type, and all that stuff at the same time. I can't even do that. But having drones around, having things like that going on, I don't think is as big of a deal as long as the benefit outweighs all of those, I don't want to call them problems, but outweighs the noise.
And I did get clarification on that question. My apologies for not understanding it. By openness, transparency, do you find that your colleagues within your age range demand more transparency perhaps than older generations? I mean, you mentioned earlier about what you do to entice competition in a healthy way.
Sure.
Would you say that from a CEO standpoint that transparency is important to you when you're dealing with other companies and people in this industry?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think especially in this small industry, it's even more important than it maybe would be normally. Not everybody in the industry is working with a lot of capital, whether that's or a lot of resources, whether that's monetary type resources or human resources. So having the ability to just go, hey, here's what we have. Let's try to make something work, right? Maybe you're working on a partnership, or as an industry, right, we're still trying to get drone delivery off the ground and autonomous flight and things like that. And that's not going to happen without everybody being transparent about what we can do. Here's the resources that I have. Here's the resources that somebody else has. And how can we all kind of work together to make this work? The more, as Randall would like to say, the more good old boy mentality, of the past, of going, well, we'll let you in on this if you have, X amount of money, or if you can produce this or that, or the big trade secret type bunker that a lot of companies have. That's just not the place for this right now, as everybody's trying to get everything off the ground. So I think transparency is a good thing, particularly in this industry right now, and it's something that I hope everybody's open to, but probably the younger generation might value it more.
Thanks, Kyle. So
Sure.
We had another question, but I kind of am going to incorporate that into our Q&A segment because another audience member actually submitted that same question. It's about leadership and advice for younger generations. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the Q&A panel. And I should have said this at the beginning. If you have a question, please feel free to submit it in the appropriate place in your Zoom panel. There should be a place for you to submit questions, and we're going to answer as many as we can. I am going to read off the question, and whichever panelist, and I mean that plural, would like to dive in, please feel free to do so. Does ride sharing and courier services play into your idea of how drone deliveries will occur in crowded cities?
I can take that one. I think it goes to the point I was making earlier, that drones aren't going to be a replacement. They're going to be, an addition to a lot of these things. So people are still going to need rides, and there may be solutions where, a van is a more economical approach. Maybe there's bad weather, there's, a quicker ground transportation route, especially in some of the major cities where there might be more restricted flight zones. So I really see drones as one more feature in the overall logistics network as opposed to an end-all be-all. So I think they're just going to complement those different things.
Thanks, Ryan. If no one else wants to chime in, I'll move on to the next question. How do you balance the I can never pronounce this word, democratization of skies? How do you balance safety with freedom? People want freedom, but there's still an inherent risk. And that's an interesting question for me. I'm not going to answer it just because I want to let the panelists talk. But as an attorney, it implicates constitutional expectations of privacy. And this is a battle we're constantly fighting in this industry. But I'd love for one of you other guys to chime in. Balancing safety with freedom, with people, balancing the ability to do what you want, to be able to take this industry and make it scalable. How does that balance against the safety aspects of drone use? I think that's a good way of wording that question.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. So, and please, others as well. I think the biggest thing is to that point of creating that accountability and transparency allows you to have that security and privacy. And so balancing those two, that so that somebody, again, can look outside the window, know the intention of that drone. They don't necessarily need to know that drone is who the address and the name of the person who's flying it. They don't need to know all of the information, but they do need to know that drone is supposed to be there, and that if that drone is doing something bad, there's something they can do. There's recourse, there's accountability. Just like with a car that drives up in front of your house and parks there, and you think it's suspicious and it makes you a little anxious, you write down the license plate. And so that allows you to say, okay, if it comes back again, I write down the license plate again, I call, and I go and I have these steps. Right now, drones are flying completely anonymously. And that's that democratization of the sky means anybody can fly anything with zero restrictions. That's the capability and accessibility are exponentially increasing every year, which means more and more drones in the skies, more and more drones doing things, and therefore it raises those questions. And so for us to create that trust, you need to be able to know that it can be safely removed without creating collateral damage, without impacting authorized drone operations. And so that's where counter UAS is a key part in counter UAS, counter drone is a key part in unlocking that. So to answer the question very simply, the answer is counter drone, safe and effective counter drone that allows you to surgically remove drones from the airspace and know which drones are authorized, the ones that are supposed to be there. And then in higher threat scenarios and environments, you have other counter drone systems that allow you to be able to shoot a laser at it or barrage jam or other types of approaches that allow you to have that assurance that in high threat scenarios, then you're able to take down even the most malicious, sophisticated bad actor.
Thanks, Luke. And you rephrased that question much more eloquently than I did. So thanks for that. This is an interesting one. What liability does a company have in an accident or technology malfunction? Does anybody want to step up to that one?
I don't mind answering this one. I don't think that's necessarily a novel problem. We've had things flying for a number of years. We have car manufacturers, and then where does the liability fall between them and the driver? And I think a lot of these models have been proven already. If it's faulty manufacturing and the design is flawed, that falls more on the OEM, as opposed to if it was, flown negligently or not on the agreed upon set of rules that keep us all safe and allow us to do what we're going to do, then it falls more on the operator. So I think these are pretty established already in current aviation and a lot of current, models built on transportation.
And Ryan, I'll add that the ops over people proposed rules, the final of which is coming out later this year, they've accounted for situations like this issue with drones causing accidents, and that's all factored in as safety is at the forefront of pretty much everything the FAA does. So that's another place where the liability issue is kind of sorted out. If no one else wants to answer that, we will move on to the next one. This is a good one. How did you find co-founders? I'm too young to know if I can trust a person by giving a share of my company. How did you guys do it?
I'll answer that one. So in my experience, unless you've known somebody for a long time, you really don't know how they're going to work out until you bring them on. So I would recommend kind of like a honeymoon period. Maybe you sign something with them for 6 months, and after that you can reassess it. And, at that point in time, either go ahead and sign an agreement for a longer period of time or just part ways. But you never know how somebody's going to work until you work with them.
I think I also want to add that don't assume, like if you partner with a family member, don't assume that your relationship as co-partners is going to reflect your relationship as family members. Because often the times, it's like when you put husbands and wives in the workplace together, sometimes it may work out, but many times it doesn't. It's a different dynamic when you're talking about putting someone in the workplace together. So I think that's also another aspect of it. I think Adam's advice is spot on, a trial period, absolutely, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're stuck with someone who is toxic for you, but you can't get out of it. So I think what Adam said was absolutely perfect.
And adding to that, just real quick on the Adam side, I would include in that agreement that if they leave within that time, they don't walk away with co-founder status, because you don't want all these co-founders out there who were with you for a month and then the honeymoon period fell out.
You're absolutely right, Luke. And I'll add that for the young entrepreneurs out there listening, or people who are considering opening your company, make sure you go by the book when it comes to corporate formalities, because a lot of times companies, when they start up, they print legal forms off of websites, which many times it's fine, but a day may come, especially when your organization succeeds, where if you don't have your corporate formalities in order, it not only will it be a nightmare to clean up, you're going to pay more in legal fees getting a lawyer to fix that than you would have had you just involved a lawyer or someone on the front end. So that's just a side piece of advice that I'll
get a good lawyer, right?
Well, I wasn't going to go there, but Luke, by all means, feel free.
Hey, Grant, can I say something to that as well, real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, I just think that whoever asked that question, they said they're too young. Reach out to anyone on this panel or anyone that you know in the industry. I lived a lot of my life without a mentor, without anyone that truly was guiding the way I was going in my career. And I bumped into a lot of things where if someone would have just told me, I could have learned from their mistakes. And so feel free. I mean, I'm not the most successful guy, and I've started businesses, but that's not where I'm at now. But I definitely am opening up myself for any sort of like feedback on what you're trying to do, because young people are, to me, like the most inspirational, it's the reason I wake up every day to do what I do. It's the reason I travel around the world to speak. If I can get in front of a K through 12 group of kids, like my favorite thing, because I think that I grew up without that type of mentorship. And I think that a good mentor will help you avoid getting in relationships with bad founders, especially if you can get them in a room with these people and you can have someone else try to suss out their intentions. I think that that's a good way to go about it.
Grant, let me jump in real quick and add to what Randall was saying. So effectively, the things that you have to endure while you're, running a business and a CEO, there's not a lot of people that are going to know what you're talking about. Like if you try to talk to your best friend about it, he's not going to understand. You try to talk to family, they're not going to understand unless they've done it themselves. So it's very important for people to be able to have people to vent with and talk through problems that actually, have been there before and know what they're talking about. Because, when you're sharing your experiences and just talking things out, you don't really get that good feedback unless somebody's been in that position. And unfortunately, that limits CEOs to talking with other CEOs. So it's very important to have a network like that. And, I'm open, just like Randall was saying. So it's important that we help each other out and just talk through things. And you really need somebody there for you.
I'll echo what both Adam and Randall said. Please reach out to anyone on this panel for any kind of advice, follow-up questions, or anything, because I think all of us want to help. Aside from that, we all want this industry to succeed, and involving people in the industry who want to make a difference is one of the best ways to drive this industry forward. So please feel free to reach out to us. I've received offline a couple regulatory questions, so I want to bring Brendan in on this discussion. Brendan, I'm asked a lot about the balance between the regulatory and policy issues and then public perception and how those interplay. I find that, in my practice, I found they're very dependent on one another. The FAA, it seems, will be less inclined to do something if it doesn't think state and local government and the public are going to support it. And to that extent, the public will only accept drones and accept advanced operations insofar as it trusts the FAA, that they are sticking by those safety standards and they have the interest of the citizens at heart. How important is public perception to what Skydio is doing in trying to establish itself as an American drone company?
Sure, I think it's difficult to overstate the importance of public perception for the success of any emerging industry, and that's especially true in the technology space like ours. You're not going to see drones shadowing the sky unless and until the public accepts that the benefits outweigh the risk. And I think the COVID crisis has been, on the whole, pretty terrible for the world, no doubt about it. But it has actually exposed, demonstrated the need for and accelerated the adoption of many forms of advanced technology, to include automated solutions. So we find, for instance, that in the commercial and industrial space, our customers are now more eager than ever to rely on automated solutions because they are dealing with severe human resource constraints. So that is, in turn, I think, gradually increasing public perception and then public acceptance of these new forms of automated technologies, human machine teaming, that sounds like science fiction, but in a world of social distancing, we have to rely on robotic assistants to perform tasks that humans once performed, especially tasks that were dangerous or difficult or really dull. So in some ways, we're seeing, I think, a new technological revolution, which is being shaped by a shift in public perception occasioned by a global crisis.
And, I mentioned this earlier on the program, how COVID-19, it seems, has had a positive effect on public perception of drones, at least to some extent. People are seeing the cases of DroneUp delivering a COVID-19 test within its Operation Last Mile. They're seeing companies who are working on trying to put together innovative uses for drones, such as detecting fevers, although Randall and I have discussed this, and it's questionable as to whether or not we're there yet, being able to isolate whether someone has a fever. But regardless, Zipline's done great things with deliveries, and all these positive things that drones are able to do, I think, have kind of been able to come to the forefront a little bit more as a result of COVID-19. What I have tried feverishly, no pun intended, because we were just talking about fevers, what I've tried feverishly to do is take that and grow the message for businesses within America that as you reopen, as you look for ways to recover economically, use drones. And the cost-saving benefits, the risk-reducing benefits, the ability to streamline operations, the versatility of uses, all that has always been there. But what better time to use drones than now? And so, that's a message that I think is really important. And I also want to add, as you know, Brendan, the FAA is very, very positive about people using drones within the fullest extent of the law as you can within Part 107. Basically, it's the best statement we've gotten from the FAA that they want us to do what we can, what we're lawfully authorized to do. May not seem like a big deal to some people. Oh, wow, okay, well, this governing body is telling you can operate within the law. But you can do some really great things within 107, including some things with delivery that people also don't think about. So in your opinion, Brendan, do you see that public perception's improved as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, I think on the whole, at least in the form of automated solutions, maybe there have been no doubt some challenges associated with civil liberties. Some other companies have sort of run into this by, having speakers that sort of shout at Americans on the streets, things like that. But so I think on the whole, it's never a clean progression towards public perception. There's always sort of fits and starts. We've had some of both over the last 4 months. But on the whole, I think there's a lot of positive trends that we're going to see automation really, it already took root before COVID. Now it's sprouting beneath the ground, again, occasioned by this crisis, which is going to force us to rely on technology in a way that we really haven't until now.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you keep stressing autonomy, because that's often an aspect of drone use that I think is overlooked. So again, we have some amazing things coming up, I think, in the regulatory arena with BVLOS and ops over people. That I think will only open the doors to further scalability. Another question, how is your relationship with the government? Drone companies need to be pretty close to the government. Is the government hesitant regarding drones, I think is what the question is. This is actually a really good question. From the standpoint of trying to move this industry forward, getting to know decision makers, government decision makers, and industry leaders is critical. Picking up the phone, trying to call the FAA, doing whatever you can to get in touch with the people as high as you can to establish a positive relationship, I think is absolutely imperative in order to move this this industry forward. And I know, Brendan, obviously you have worked in the government. Would you agree that it's definitely always a good thing to get involved with the people who are in a governmental position able to make decisions?
Well, sure. This is a tightly regulated industry, right? So in some industries, you won't run headlong into these challenges, but not in ours. Welcome to the world of aviation, where everything above a blade of grass is owned by the FAA. So that's right. You need a guide, not only from a business sense, but from a policy and regulatory sense, who can shepherd you through this forest of regulations and actually get your products in the field, in the hands of customers, doing meaningful work that drive value. And to do that, you need to understand the regulatory system and understand the people who drive that system.
I agree. And I always tell my clients it's better to let the FAA know ahead of time that you're doing something with drones than it is for them to read about it in the paper. Even if you don't necessarily take it from a standpoint of, even if you don't think you need to ask the FAA for permission, just meeting with them, forming that relationship, keeping them, updated, not keeping them in the dark, letting them know what's going on. I think they really appreciate that. And that's so critical. And it's, like I said, I'll say it again because it bears repeating. It is always better for them to find out on the front end than to hear about it from the media. Because there's, aside from the fact that it's good policy to speak with them beforehand anyway, you don't know how the media is going to construe it. Not everyone is Miriam McNabb with Drone Life. Not everyone is Jeremiah Karpowicz. Not everyone is going to positively report what you're doing with your drone. So that's why it's so important to make that connections on the forefront. We are almost out of time. I'm going to ask the panel if anyone has any closing statements they'd like to make or anything. I know we didn't really get to our fourth question, which was what advice would you give individuals wanting to establish a business or leadership role? We kind of worked that in to our Q&As, but does anyone have any parting words for the attendees?
Thank you so much for taking the time and listening to us. And thank you to Grant and Zach and the whole MarketScale team for having us.
Yeah, thank you. But I maybe have something. And Grant, we've talked about this, but one thing you can notice about this panel is we're all guys and we're all pretty uniform as far as like our you and I are trying to do something about that. Absolutely. So just one thing for anyone that's in the drone industry, when you see women or people of colors or people of color or other, minorities, lift them up, bring them into conversations. There's a lot of brilliant minds that aren't just young white males in this industry, and we have to do better at bringing their voices into the conversation. I agree completely. And Randall, I think you've done a good job at encouraging the involvement of women in the industry. I've tried to do my part too, and hopefully we'll make some strides so that this time, maybe next year, if we do another panel like this, there will be more people of color or women on the panel who start their own drone company or succeeding in their own drone company. Absolutely.
Well, on my side, I'd absolutely want to echo that and appreciate you calling that out, Randall, so eloquently. But again, thank you for everybody who's here. And everyone, you might not be able to see it, but on the comments side here, we've been going back and forth and saying, like, anybody truly reach out to us. You reach us on LinkedIn. I think some of our emails will be shared with you. We want to help support the next generation of this industry. And there's just so much that needs to be done. It's ripe for innovation. And just know that we're here to support and encourage the success of this industry together.
I'll add that for those of you who are looking to contact any of the panelists, if you go to any of our LinkedIn's, I'm going to ask the six of you to share. I'm going to post the link where people who've attended or who watch this program can find our contact information. So if you are unable to, for some reason to locate any of our email addresses, please go look on our LinkedIn's profiles. I'm going to make sure I post the MarketScale website that has that information on there. I think any of us would love to speak with you any of us would be willing. We love talking drones, obviously, and it's been a pleasure to speak to everyone who's participating right now, but we especially want to serve as we want to show the younger generations that there is a future in this industry. It takes collaboration, it takes positivity, but if we work together, we really can build something very special. And I think we have, and I think we'll continue to do so. So thank you again to all my panelists. It's always a pleasure working with all of you. I'll say it again, Adam, you're the one who got me involved in this industry. So I can't thank you enough. Life-changing. All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in to this webinar, and please visit MarketScale's website to tune into some other excellent content, including my weekly podcast, Drones in America, where I talk not only with these guys, but with other people involved in the industry as well. Thank you and have a good day.